So, hello everyone. Some of you might know me, but for those who don't, my name is Boris. I currently work at Euroherc Insurance as a lead software engineer, and I'm also a PhD student in information management. And where one of my biggest focuses is how AI affects developers today from a business standpoint. So, what we're going to talk about today. So first, we're going to define what vibe coding really is, because you want to start with definition usually. And then we're going to see some myths of it, like what most people think of it, like stereotypes or something like that. Then I'm going to talk about a bit about my personal experience, some of the success stories, some of the cases where it completely failed, and then we're going to try to build this little bit of a framework to, or like a mental model, how to actually think whether you should actually do do stuff with fully AI with vibe coding, or you should just manually type it like self, like in the good old days. Usually, when you see the discourse online, there's like this huge divide with people. Some people are fully into it, let's go, while the others are completely pessimistic, really negative about it. I personally think it's usually most people are somewhere in the middle. Like, it depends on the case. And sometimes it's terrible, sometimes it's really good, but it's fine, at least. And I think the word "it depends," you're going to hear a lot of it today. Uh, as I said, we want to define vibe coding in a way. So what vibe coding is actually writing code in a state where you trust your, let's say, creative instinct in a way, and you leverage AI to make everything more fluid, to write faster, and to ship with without over engineering or planning too much about it. So the biggest preconception, especially like 1 or 2 years ago when this whole thing started, was it was really, really reckless to do. It was something that people thought, okay, you're just doing something, copy pasting from ChatGPT. You don't have any plan. You don't have any ideas how it will work. Uh, at the beginning, you saw some people putting stuff on Twitter with like, look at my page, it's really cool, and you can see it on localhost 3000, stuff like that. And usually, unmaintainable spaghetti code was what we all thought about it at the beginning, because some of the stuff that it wrote was really weird. So I wanted to actually do some tests myself within like the work environment of insurance company. So I tried 4 different things with GitHub Copilot, Claude Code, OpenAI Codex, and Gemini. And one big thing that I wanted, like for myself, is that I wanted to test the default experience of all those things. So to see how it works without any, like for Claude MD files, without any additional configurations, but out of the box, how I could actually try and make it work for some cases. And that was some like my own self-restriction, which might be good, might not be, but we'll see. I had a couple of really, really great things coming out of this, let's say, experiment. First of all, like within a workday, I had an app which was like literally started to being published, and it's still working today for a while. And for 4 hours from opening the VS Code to actually saying I'm done. The second one is actually making a really, really complex form app from scratch. We're going to talk about the details a bit later. Then extending some features which are very well defined, and also like stuff where what you can do is update multiple things all together when you have a really good template. But let's go through it one by one. The first one was became an app for business needs. So there were a lot of mails that were coming that were all written in the same way. So you get an email from some public office, which comes in the pretty much the same template, and of course they don't have APIs, or at least REST APIs. Usually it's just some old SVC code. So what we wanted to see is that how to make something that will work really well from scratch, where you just put the email in, you get the stuff in your database without typing it manually. And that was like the cool thing about it. And why it worked was because those emails have a very clear template. If an email didn't fit the template, it just didn't go inside the parser anymore. It was fine. It was very, very well defined. And it's not a complicated task once you actually know what to do. And putting stuff in the database, we already had everything built in because this is the stuff that was done manually before. So yeah, half the work was done over then, but then everything was done in this same day. And only literally one manual intervention since deploying it, and that was feature extension, not that something went wrong. And what's really cool is that most of the code we kept it as is, so without any additional changes. The second thing was a really, really complex form with over 250 fields, who most of them have validations. So has anyone here had a car crash where you had to fill the European report? Yeah. So for those who were lucky enough to never see that kind of thing, it's a really, really long form where you have to fill everything manually by paper for both parties. And now if you want to digitize it, you have huge amount of fields, of course, which people have to actually manually not only fill the information about their insurance status, about themselves, but also draw a little drawing of how the accident happened actually, and where was the damage on your car. And we actually made it mostly via vibe coding without too much intervening. Why? Because it was project starting from zero. And even though the form is long, complex to do manually, validation is relatively simple. It's whether or not the field is present there or not. So it's relatively okay. And what was really cool that about the way it did those UI fields. First, we thought we would have to make like a mobile app, where people have to download it, and it didn't seem convenient. So web app was kind of the main goal. So making canvases, integrating, picking the exact location of the accident where it happened via OpenStreetMaps, then putting that as a canvas, then drawing like an image of car A crashing into car B. It was mostly done via the Claude code itself. So really, really cool thing. And why I'm really happy with it is that it saved me so much manual work typing those forms out, because that's where the biggest hassle of the whole thing laid in. Also, when you wanted to extend some existing features that you have, which are very well defined, and something new that's coming after it is actually something that's relatively similar, working within most of the same restrictions that the old thing was. There you can actually work really easily because you have a lot of context that pre-exists, and then you can just drive forward. Also, for example, if you have to do updates on the multiple projects on the same time, like for example, a couple of weeks or a month ago, you had to update Next.js apps to the newest version because of the security issues. So, for example, what I did personally was manually updated one of the apps that we had to update to the newest version, and committed it, asked the AI to check that commit and do the same things for project B, project C, project D. And it did the work word for word, saving me a ton of manual work, which I would have to be doing myself and rechecking. While if it follows the exact same pattern, it's going to do it pretty much perfectly. And you can compare the change sets, they're going to be more or less the same. But where it works is not really the fun thing to hear. You want to see where it actually went really, really bad. And some of those were maybe more surprising, to me at least, and some are less. Like updating from .NET Framework from .NET Core. Like in the Visual Studio, you even have the right-click modernize. If you have like GitHub Copilot subscription and also like Visual Studio, but I did it through multiple of those agents, and it was messed up every time. It wasn't the same mess up every time, but there are a lot of differences that are really subtle when you read through the code. And if you have larger APIs, it's going to be a lot of code that's changed. But the problem is that when you have something that's fundamentally different, like it's more of a different frameworks, but in the same language, in the C#, than just a simple, okay, this is just a version 2 to 3. And the other thing was, okay, people are more and more talking about, yeah, we're going to modernize the old apps. We won't have COBOL anywhere anymore. So I wanted to try exactly that. We have a Visual Basic 6 app, which is, for those who are a bit older, you might know a bit. It's an old Microsoft-based desktop class language. And of course, I wanted to modernize it to be much more maintainable for newer hires, because someone who comes fresh out of the university won't even know what a Visual Basic 6 is, or has never seen the apps written in that. So you want to make it easy for a whole team. You don't have to depend on the few guys who do know it. But the problem is that this is the different paradigm of a language completely. You have to really, really rethink how it works, because back then you had a lot of restrictions which you don't have now. And trying, for example, to make a desktop app into a web app is difficult by itself. But also making a desktop app into a newer version of desktop app, it's also a different language. And those mistakes that were done back then, those issues that were done at the time, translated into the newer version. And it was just more of a blinded copy paste of a business logic, which might have worked back then, but it doesn't work now. And also when you're dealing with really, really complex business logic, even today, there are a lot of issues. Like you have some type of business rule where you have a company A gets discount 25%. For others, you can get 10% off for cash. And then when AI sees it, okay, it's some kind of exception, I can make that exception for the next one, while the next one should be in the rules part. Then when you have some workarounds, because I don't know, if you're dealing with a public company where you have like they have an API which you have to access for whatever reason, and then they have their own specific date time format, and then you have it in your app because you have to, you're dealing with it, and then that type of code smell propagates somewhere else because, oh, that's what AI saw first. Because that's also what happens with people who learn. Like I made the same mistake myself when I saw like bad code in Visual Basic 6. When I saw it for the first time, I just landed on the bad code, I repeated it myself because I didn't know better at the time. And if you have some type of special edge cases which are outside of the normal way of working, it's usually best to try those type of changes yourself. And so we go back to the question whether it is good or bad, chaotic or not. It depends, as I said. It depends mostly of the team size. If you're working on a project by yourself, it's easier to handle than when you're doing stuff with 20, 30, 50 people at the same time. Also, if it's something that's like an internal tool, which can be checked within the premises of the company, let's say, it's much less dangerous when you're vibe coding like a medical device. Same thing is if you're doing something relatively quick, like the email parser that I mentioned, it's not going to be an issue if you fail. It's fine. But if you have a multi-year project which has done something wrong at the beginning, it's going to propagate through years. And also if you have domain is also a big part, like where you can actually see whether you should vibe code something or not. If you're dealing with money, it's maybe better to at least triple check it after vibe coding. But if you're doing like some changes in front end UI, like, okay, I don't want to use shred CN, I'm going to do everything myself in Tailwind, rewrite it. Okay, it won't matter too much. And like working example of the control chaos was the app with the email. So the speed was a really big thing. So it helped that everything was done in one session. So no context was lost for both me and my AI partner, which is important, especially because people are more and more talking about the context of AI. But what about our brain context? We also forget stuff. And that's also a big thing. Second, with the structure, if you envelop it with the correct structure, with correct tests, with correct pipelines, it's more likely than not going to be fine if you actually carry all those things out. And you can catch the edge cases way before than when it's in production. And lastly, you need to use your common sense, of course. You won't manually review things, especially if it's something risky. And when we kind of generalize all those things, what do I mean with control chaos? So with control chaos, it means we have good speed, like really fast iteration. We can ship our MVPs really fast. And more importantly, fail when it's really cheap at the beginning than when it's costly. And you can do the stuff for prototyping. Also, if you have really good structure, especially in the other projects, you can put the same structure for it relatively fast and have the same guardrails as you had before, which is really important. And you need to know when to stop, when to, okay, I need to do it myself. It's gone too far. Control Z, let's go over. And also the technical expertise that you have might not only be related to the programming language that you have, it might be more specific to your work environment, to your team, how you write code, how you name everything, why you do something. And like just 5 days ago, for example, I don't know if you followed it, but yeah, IVS had a really cool thing where it was down for 13 hours because AI coding assistance deleted the engineer's code, and it wanted to start from scratch because it deemed it wasn't good enough. So yeah, and if you do this stuff for something that's mission critical as AVS, maybe you want to take it down a notch. So what I wanted to also convey is where it can thrive and where it can falter. So it all follows from the previous ideas. When you're doing some prototypes and MVPs, where you want to check if something is really viable, it's great. It's great for smaller teams, and especially great if you're solo. Then, if it's something that's internal, there's much lower risk of when something goes wrong, it's going to make a huge damage. And if you have a mindset of, okay, I'm the main person's here, this is just assisting me, it's going to be much easier when you give over the reins. So also when it wasn't good, at least for me, was when you're dealing with huge projects, and also when it's something mission critical, it can make a mess. And when you're writing something, you also have a lot of it in context. But when you read like 30 file changes with thousands of lines of code, you won't review all of them. I mean, you might, but mostly we don't. We sometimes skip over some stuff that might be important. And that also applies when you have some really messy business logic. So I made a framework for myself what I wanted to change. So if when I'm doing something, can I describe the input and output easily? The second question that I ask myself is there something that AI can learn from to leverage the context? The third thing is that can I verify the output myself? So if the output actually is something that I can manage myself, if it's in an environment that I know, if it's a programming language that I know, yeah, I'm much more likely to do it than when, for example, if I've never written a line of code in Go, I won't vibe code the Go project. And the same thing is if it's something critical. If it's something critical, I'm more likely to actually review it. So, for example, if all those questions are yes, then it's completely safe to do it, because usually when you fulfill all those yeses, it's going to be much lower impact than if you have a couple of no's. No doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. No means, okay, you need to put a lot of guardrails, especially if it's some critical thing. And a couple of key takeaways is that it's not something, AI coding, it's not something that's reckless by itself, it's a tool. It's just, if you consider it, okay, it's a hammer, it's like a screwdriver. It's much more easier to visualize, okay, I'm the person who's responsible for this. This is not something that I've left my work to do and I've given up. Also, it's not really good to force AI adoption on people, like you must do it if they are not mentally ready. Like if you don't feel too much into it, you have to try it yourself, build up that confidence. And if you start with the big projects with AI assisted stuff, it's going to more likely than not end up bad. If you start small with something that you want, something that will help you personally, maybe you're much more likely to understand it because you want something to work faster. And also, guardrails which you have should be automated. Like if so, all those checks can be done as quickly as possible. And I think a lot of people, especially CEOs, say AI slop is a bad bird. Don't do it. Don't say that. But it's real. AI slop is something that's happening, and our best defense against it is our own common sense. And of course, the last thing, it's always more contextual, or it depends. That's everything from me. So I thank you for listening. And I'm going to put the presentation on my website later on. So if someone wants to check the slides, you can see it there. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, you were raising your hand before. Okay. Mhm. So for the legacy, leg, so first question was about how it works with the legacy code. It really depends. Sometimes it was really good when everything was defined clear, but if you have some code that's maybe 20 plus years old, it has a lot of messy things inside it, a lot of decisions that were taken that person that made them went away, or you don't have anyone to ask for the context, so it's a bit harder. And for juniors, I actually think when you're learning something, it's good to try it also manually, because when you do it manually, you fail, and you need to understand why you failed. And when you actually fail and correct yourself, you're gonna more likely be to remember what you did as a mistake. And what I've seen with juniors using AI tools blindly, like without any, how do you say, guardrails, the big issue was that they made a mistake at the beginning. And then to fix that mistake, they relied completely on AI. And then it evolved into something. And then they ask you a question, okay, how do I fix this? Okay, why did you do that? And then they explain the whole thing that they did with AI, and it was easily fixable with a simple change, like a one line of code instead of three files of garbled mess. So I think the key takeaway that I want to say is it's good as a learning tool to find information, like as a quick Googler, not as a doer for you. Because if you do it manually, like search Stack Overflow, for example, you're going to get a lot of different types of answers. So AI is really great as a learning tool, but for actually for it to be doing it for yourself, I would actually myself prefer that they actually have some hands-on experience. Uh, I hope that answered your question. Are there any more questions? Yeah. Mhm.
I'm wondering, have you ever owned a startup or been in one?
Sorry, I haven't.
Have you ever been in a startup, like two or three people trying to, ship something to market?
I was in a startup when I was a lot younger, but I worked in, yeah, but like last, like even before COVID, I've been working in the enterprise environment. Hmm. Hmm.
How viable think type because just this,
Hmm.
theoretically, if vibe coding was legit,
Hmm.
there wouldn't be any need for developers to ship the product to market. If all you need is
You ask about the viability of vibe coding for startups. I think that there's even more need for developers right now than before, because if you give this, like, for example, let's say Claude Code, you give it to a non-technical person, they can build an MVP, but will they maintain it properly? Will they have it grow properly? Like for something that's really quick and easy, it's great, but you have to have the programming experience to actually know where to take it further. Like if you want to make an MVP, sell it to someone, cash out, yeah, why not? But if you want something to build like a company around which will grow, be uh, with 50, 100 people, a product that will be used more, you're more likely than not going to need additional experience. And also, uh, now because vibe coding is more approachable, I think more and more companies that didn't have their own internal developers will actually have a couple of them, which would be able to maintain their own internal software. But now we're a bit of a at the precipice. It was same before, like a long time ago, there were punch cards, and then came COBOL, and the COBOL came out. Everyone was saying, okay, there's no need for developers, business people will do it, and then they had more developers. COBOL is still used right now. Also, then after you had IDEs. Oh yeah, it's auto-completing. Half of the people won't work, and now look where we are. We're in a similar place where it's so new that everyone is kind of still figuring it out. Even I think even the experts are figuring it out, mostly because it's still growing, it's still developing. We're still not stable there. So the whole market is still a bit wavy. If that answered your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So essentially, if you were to have a startup again,
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't use it.
No, I would. I would. Yeah. I didn't say I wouldn't. It's viable. I would use it, but I wouldn't necessarily say I won't use any developers.
You would leverage both.
I would leverage both, definitely. You can't really do everything without developers. You need them. Yep. Any more questions? Yeah, sure.
Categories where
Mm-hmm.
when it's good to use the vibe coding, when
Mm-hmm.
it's not good, and the last one was domain.
Mm-hmm.
So the category was like the extreme, like financial software.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You want to say that kind of you use the vibe coding more on the UI and kind of maybe deeper layering.
Mm-hmm.
The way you said describe this category sounded more like stick category. Okay, financial,
Yep.
they can be actually more risky, right?
Mm-hmm.
UI,
Yeah. Yep.
But maybe the domain is actually
Mm-hmm.
domain code, right?
Yep.
More on presentation.
Yep. Mm-hmm. When you're working on something that's extremely simple, it's much easier to actually recognize whether it's good or bad. When you're working on something complex that you have to ask other people, like if you're using, for example, I'm going to talk from insurance perspective, calculation for insurance policy of, for example, car insurance. There are lots of edge cases, there are lots of mathematics involved, and you can maybe try one area, it will go well, but if you try the calculation, for example, for another type of car, it will be wrong, and you won't know why. You would have to know exactly the domain that you're working in, that you can identify the error. It's not as risky if you're fully into it, like if you know how it works deeply. But if it's something that you're not really familiar with, you're not going to be able to see if it's done a good job, partially good job, or if there are lots of mistakes, or maybe even one mistake is very, very risky there. Like one addition, one small multiplication will make the whole insurance policy be maybe cheaper than it should be, which is a loss for a company, or more expensive than it should be, which is also a loss for a company because people won't buy it because it's unreasonably expensive. So, and you have no way of testing it yourself. So I would say if you have to do something that's very, very domain specific, you have to be sure that you can verify it, or at least you can bring a person next to you and verify it manually. So if that verification process is much longer than actually writing it yourself, maybe it's faster to just change it yourself. I hope I've answered your question. Uh, is it okay if we do one?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, we have to. Mm-hmm.
Really.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us how many dollars per month that's pretty low?
I I can't really tell you about cost because it's something that I actually started to using myself. Like I get, for example, with Claude Code, I have a pro subscription, so I work for within the hours that I have. So it's not something that I'm using still full time as my main way of working, which I will transition to eventually. But at the moment, I can't tell you really the numbers exactly if I'm doing it like full time all day exclusively via those tools. Any more questions or? Okay, okay.
Thank you, Boris.
Thank you.